Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at inflammation, but like really zooming in, like all the way down to inside your cells. We'll be taking a close look at an article called MAPK Signaling in Inflammatory Cytokines Pathways. It's from Assay Genie. They're a company that makes tools for scientists to do research, so you know it's going to be good. So, have you ever thought about how your body even knows to start inflammation? Well, get ready, because we're about to find out.
It's pretty amazing what's going on there. You don't even realize.
Right.
So we'll be focusing on this pathway called the Mitogen-Activated Protein Kinase pathway,
Yeah.
MAPK for short. Basically, it's this chain of proteins inside your cells. They're kind of like runners in a relay race.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah. So each protein passes a signal along to the next one, like a baton. And that's how messages get from outside the cell all the way to the nucleus, which is the control center of the cell, this whole communication system. The MAPK pathway is super important for a bunch of stuff, like cell growth and development, even cell death. But today we're focusing on its role in inflammation.
Right, so it's like a multi-purpose system. But we're zeroing in on just one of its jobs today.
Exactly. And to understand how it works in inflammation, we got to talk about some key players. These are called inflammatory cytokines. They're like the messengers of your immune system. And when it comes to inflammation, two of the biggest names are TNF-alpha and IL-6.
So these cytokines are kind of like sending out an alarm when there's like an injury or an infection, letting the body know something's up.
Exactly. You can almost think of them as like little air horns going off inside your cells, signaling that something needs attention. So when a cytokine like TNF-alpha, it binds to a receptor on the surface of the cell, and that sets off a chain reaction. It activates the first kinase in the MAPK pathway.
Ah, so that's where our relay race analogy comes back in, like that first runner getting the baton.
Exactly. And these kinases, they're like little switches that get flipped on, and they turn on other proteins. And this creates this whole cascade of events, like a chain reaction. And this amplifies the signal from that first cytokine, leading to the production of even more inflammatory molecules.
So it's like a domino effect.
Exactly. Each domino knocking over the next.
So even one tiny cytokine can trigger a huge inflammatory response.
Yep, because of this chain reaction.
That's wild. But okay, so if this MAPK pathway is all about amplifying inflammation, how does our body ever get inflammation under control? We can't be inflamed all the time, right?
You're totally right. That's actually one of the coolest things about the MAPK pathway. It's this two-sided thing. It can both promote inflammation and limit it.
Wait, so the same pathway that triggers inflammation can also control it. That seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, but it's what makes this system so powerful. It's like having an accelerator and a brake pedal for inflammation. Some of the proteins in the MAPK pathway actually act as brakes, slowing down or even stopping that inflammatory cascade.
Whoa, so some of those runners in our relay race are actually running in the opposite direction.
Huh. I like that. That's a great way to think about it. And this duality is crucial for keeping things balanced in your body. Too much inflammation can lead to all sorts of problems, chronic diseases, but too little inflammation, and you're more vulnerable to infections.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. And that's why the MAPK pathway is such a hot area of research, especially for inflammatory diseases.
I can see why. This is all so fascinating. There's so much going on behind the scenes that we don't even realize.
Right.
It really is a delicate balance, isn't it? And when it gets messed up, that's when you start seeing those inflammatory diseases pop up.
Right.
Like rheumatoid arthritis. That's a big one. It's like your body is attacking itself, specifically the joints.
Yeah, it's an autoimmune disease. The immune system is going haywire.
Yeah.
And it causes all this chronic inflammation and pain.
And so the MAPK pathway is involved in this.
Big time. It's actually overactive in the joints of people with rheumatoid arthritis, like those dominoes we were talking about. They're just constantly falling, and it just keeps fueling that joint damage and pain.
So if scientists could figure out a way to, like, calm down that overactive pathway, maybe they could actually treat rheumatoid arthritis.
Exactly. That's what they're working on right now, developing drugs that target specific kinases within the MAPK pathway. The goal is to dampen that inflammatory response, but without messing up the other important things that the pathway does.
So it's like trying to silence those air horns, but without shutting down the entire communication system.
Exactly.
That's got to be tricky.
Oh, it is. And it's not just rheumatoid arthritis either. The MAPK pathway is involved in a bunch of other inflammatory conditions. Psoriasis is another one.
Psoriasis, that's the one with the skin, right? Red patches and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's a chronic skin disease. Lots of inflammation there, too.
Are there any treatments for that target the MAPK pathway?
There are, actually. There are already some FDA-approved drugs for psoriasis that work by targeting specific kinases in the pathway. And they've been pretty successful for a lot of patients, reducing inflammation,
Hmm.
improving those skin symptoms.
Wow. So this tiny little pathway is really having a big impact on people's lives. But you mentioned earlier that targeting this pathway can be tough.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Why is that?
Well, the main issue is that the MEPK pathway doesn't just control inflammation. It's involved in so many other crucial processes in the cell.
Right, right, like cell growth and all that.
Exactly. So if you just block the entire pathway, you can end up causing all sorts of unintended problems.
Yeah, you don't want to be shutting down important functions in the body.
Exactly. You got to be really careful. So that's why researchers are focusing on developing drugs that are super specific, like molecular scalpels. They want to target just the parts of the MAPK pathway that are driving the inflammation and leave everything else alone.
So basically finding a way to target those inflammatory dominoes, but without knocking over the whole chain.
Exactly.
Sounds complicated.
It is. But if we can figure it out, it could totally change how we treat all kinds of inflammatory diseases.
It's crazy to think there's this whole universe happening inside of us that we don't even know about.
Right?
It makes you appreciate how complex our bodies really are.
Yeah. And it all starts with those tiny little proteins. You know, we were talking about the article from Assay Genie. And it's cool because they make all these tools that scientists use to study things like MAPK.
Right. So our understanding of this pathway, it's always growing as researchers do more experiments and make new discoveries. And it's exciting to see how that new knowledge is actually leading to new treatments for people, like those targeted therapies we were talking about.
Yeah, and the article mentions that targeting this pathway can be really tough
Yeah.
because, like we said, it's not just involved in inflammation.
Yeah, it does so much more.
So scientists have to be super careful so they don't accidentally mess up other important functions in the body.
Right. It's almost like doing surgery, but on a molecular level.
Wow.
You got to be really precise.
Absolutely. I think that's a great takeaway from the article, that there's still so much we don't know about MAPK
Oh, yeah.
and how it all works.
We're just scratching the surface.
But that's what makes it so interesting, right? Definitely.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore.
It's like we've opened this door
Yeah.
to this whole new world inside ourselves, and we're just starting to figure out how it all fits together.
And who knows what we'll find as we keep researching.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah. Each of us, we have this intricate system inside us, this MAPK pathway, that's constantly regulating inflammation.
And we don't even know it's there.
And what's even cooler is that our everyday choices can actually influence it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Things like our diet, how much stress we have, even the environment, they can all impact the balance of this pathway.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. It's like we have more control over our health than we realize.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about how MAPK signaling works, its role in inflammation and disease, and even some potential for new treatments.
Yeah, it's been a great deep dive.
I hope everyone listening found it interesting.
I hope so too.
And if you want to learn more, we'll be sure to include some links in the show notes to the Assay Genie article and some other helpful resources.
Great idea.
Well, that about wraps it up for today.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time for another deep dive